Shalom. I'm very excited to be here this morning, and it's really an honor. And I would like to speak to you about the two-state solution. But first of all, I would like to tell you something more about myself and my roots. I was not born in Israel. I was born in Russia, in a place that when I was born there, it was Russia. When my father was born there, it was Poland. And when my grandfather was born there, it was Austro-Hungary. Now it's called Ukraine. It means that I'm a Galiciano, basically. When I was 3 years old, we left Russia and then we came to Israel. And the reason that I'm telling you this is because my decision to stay in the military, which I'm often asked, why did you decide to stay in the military? Because there were other options as well. My parents, they dreamed that I would become a physician. And I decided to stay in the military because of the Yom Kippur War. As you remember, in 1973, I was then in the military, a very, very young officer. And between the second and the third day of the war, I was then in the Air Force, and I still cannot say anything about my duty, still, after so many years. I realized that this is maybe it's going to be the end of the state of Israel. And this is the way that we felt on our base. It was an Air Force base, and we really had all the information. So I decided that if Israel will stay and will still be a country after the war, I'm going to stay in the military because this is the most important thing I can do for my grandfather and grandmother and all my Jewish family that were killed in the Holocaust. Because otherwise, this was my personal decision. And as you know, as the result of the Yom Kippur War, I didn't go to medical school. And I stayed in the military for 27 years. So I'm really an Israeli patriot. But my way to express in 2010 my patriotism is a little bit different than, many people in Israel do believe in my views, but it's a little bit different, and it really expresses the views of J Street. That's why I accepted the invitation to talk here. You see, the two-state solution is something that the left parties in Israel, like the Labour Party and other parties, were talking for many years. And it didn't start in Oslo, in the negotiation in 1993. It started before because the leaders of the left side, the left parties in Israel, realized that we are living in a place that two nations are fighting for their identity, national identity. This is the Palestinian state and the Jewish state. And the problem is that we cannot ignore the fact that there are Palestinians in Israel. So for many years, the right side of the Israeli political men said that this country belongs to us. As a matter of fact, I do believe that Israel belongs to the Jews, because I'm a Jew. However, we cannot ignore the situation on the ground. On the ground, when the Zionism was created in the latest 19th century, in the early 20th century, the Palestinians lived in Israel. They didn't have a country. They were not called, they didn't have then maybe inspiration like they have now, but they really they stayed there. They refused to accept the declaration in 47 from Kaftet November, it's 29th of November, the resolution of the UN that divided the country into two states. They refused to do it. By the way, also in the Arab countries they refused it. We accepted it, and the war started. And many Palestinian refugees left the country, but nevertheless, they are still there. After the 67 war, we didn't have any other choice, by the way. So we didn't want to occupy the West Bank that belonged to the Jordanians, but the Jordanians made a very big mistake, and they invaded to Israel. They started the war, which we didn't want it, by the way. And we didn't have any other choice, so we had to occupy the West Bank, which was not an occupation because we didn't intend to do it. But the situation is that now in Israel, between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, there are two nations fighting for their identity. So for many years, some part of the Israeli leaders and public didn't want to realize that we have to deal with the Palestinians. That there is no way for Israel to be secured, and I'm talking security here, unless there will be some kind of a solution for the Palestinians in inspiration. I'm glad to say that over the years, even the people that belong to the right side of the political map did understand and did realize that there will not be a solution for our problem in Israel unless there will be a Palestinian state. And that this is an Israeli interest to create a Palestinian state. This was not easy for the right wing, but you cannot ignore the facts on the ground. And I must say, since you are going to host AIPAC people next something,
in a couple of
I'm very happy to say that 2 years ago, when I was speaking in the Congress and with Florida congresswoman, and I said what I said, she said, but AIPAC people were here a few days ago, and they sounded exactly like you. And I said, oh, finally, they speak exactly like me. Because they realized, I worked with it very hard. Because also, the people that belong to the center and to the right realize that there is no other solution. And this is the truth. Even the Prime Minister of Israel that doesn't belong to J Street, and he is a Likud member, he was born to a Likud family. He declared in the famous Bar Ilan speech that he is in favor of a two-state solution. And because, you see, I have a very good friend, she belongs to a center-right wing party. And she said to me the other day, before she heard that I'm coming to speak to you, you see, the only difference between the two of us is that we do believe, both of us, that this two-state solution is the only solution. However, I am doing it because I don't have any other choice. Because this is the only solution for the state of Israel. And you are doing it because you think that they also deserve a state of their own. And I'm sorry to say, which I told her, I'm doing it first of all because I'm concerned for the future of the state of Israel. This is my main concern. Because otherwise, let's explore a little bit the alternatives. I can speak like for 5 hours, which I will not do, because I want you to ask questions, about the fact that the situation is not staying in a static position. It's changing all the time. 2 years ago, Turkey was our strongest ally in the neighborhood. What happens now? They like to lead the Muslim wall in our region, So they are talking in a different way, and Erdogan appears as if he is really not interested in the continuation of the state of Israel. He doesn't say it yet, but maybe he will. The situation is changing all the time. Many years ago, when Arafat was in power, we didn't have the problems of the Hamas. Hamas was an insignificant, when I was in the military, Hamas was an insignificant power in Palestine. Everybody ignored them. Sheikh Yassin, you remember Sheikh Yassin, which then was killed. It was not a natural death. He was not important. He was in Israeli jail, and he was not important. But now the Hamas is a very significant power because the atmosphere changed. There is a more and more tendency toward radicalism in the Middle East. More and more extreme Muslims, which you know since September 11, what they are capable of doing. So whenever we ignore the peace movement from the other side, and we don't relate to them, to make peace with them, then after a few years, we are sitting regretting that we had this chance a few years ago, and we missed the opportunity. And it happens all the time, believe me. And since the situation now is that if a Palestinian state will not be created as soon as possible, and I'm talking about a viable Palestinian state, in the West Bank first, this endangers the future of the state of Israel, because a one-state solution is a disaster and a recipe for a disaster for the state of Israel. Why? Because of two reasons. As you know, we are a Jewish and democratic state. This was the reason to create the state of Israel, because it has to be a homeland for all the Jewish people, not for other people, for the Jewish people. So since we created the state of Israel, we believe strongly that it should remain a Jewish state and it should remain democratic. No way for Israel to be democratic and Jewish if we don't have a Palestinian state as our neighbor. Because we are talking about not only the demographic threat, which means that Israel will not be able to be in a few years a democratic state. A democratic state means that every person that lives in Israel is entitled to vote for the parliament, which is the Israeli Knesset. If they will have, if Israel will stay democratic, and every Muslim and Arab in Israel between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea will be entitled to vote because we are a democratic state, Israel will not longer be a Jewish state. It's not easy to deal with it. I'm not saying this is a piece of cake. And if you want, I will talk about the new approach of the Hamas. But the real threat to Israel comes from the more east country, which is called Iran. This is the real threat for Israel. And then the second threat for Israel comes from, Lebanon, which is the same. From Lebanon and from Syria. Why? Because all Israel can be covered by missiles coming from Lebanon now. All Israel. In the second Lebanon war, I was in Tel Aviv, and the missiles didn't reach Tel Aviv. Now they are reaching Tel Aviv. The missiles from Syria are reaching Eilat, which is the southern part of Israel. So this is not the security threat of Israel, because if we are talking about, and Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu said it, and it's also in the Geneva Accord, by the way. If we are talking about a Palestinian state, we are talking about a state that doesn't have heavy armors, which is really not a very big threat to the Israeli country, to Israel. Which is, what is the threat? Syria is a threat. Lebanon, Hezbollah, basically, I'm talking about Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is a threat because they are now the most significant military power in Lebanon. I don't know what will happen after I think nothing, about the Hariri investigation, the murder of Hariri, which was the Prime Minister of Lebanon, and his son is now the Prime Minister. But I'm sure that Hezbollah will continue to be the most powerful force in Lebanon. And I didn't talk about the Hamas yet, which are influenced by Iran. Iran is not dangerous because of the nuclear power, only because of the nuclear power. It is dangerous because this way, when they will gain the nuclear power, they will be more influential in the area. And everybody here, I'm sure, read all the publications, whatever. And it was written there, very clear, that Saudi Arabia and all the countries that are producing oil urge the United States what to do? To attack Iran. Because they will be the most influential power in the area. And by the way, also Europe is not very calm about the nuclear abilities of Iran. Because the range of the missiles of Iran, they reach Paris. I'm not talking about Russia, because I think they can reach Moscow as well. So if they want to play this game, it's a problem for all the world. And in our region, they are supporting Hezbollah, they are supporting Hamas, they are supporting the Islamic Jihad, which are very dangerous, I mean in terror terms. So this is the threat for Israel, I mean Iran and all the other groups. The other thing is, since this is so dangerous that Iran will have the nuclear power and be the most significant power in the Middle East, we have to think what is the alternative. In order to create a Palestinian state, where should it be created? It cannot be created on the second floor of Israel. It has to be created somewhere. Where? In the West Bank, first.